The laughter stopped mid-sentence. Jimmy Fallon's signature smile faded as he watched Jack Black's face transform from animated joy to something deeper, more raw. The Tonight Show studio fell into an unexpected silence, 300 audience members sensing that something profound was about to unfold. It started like any other Tuesday nights. Jack Black had bounced onto the stage with his usual explosive energy, regaling Jimmy and the audience with stories about his latest projects. The Roots provided their signature musical guptglup, the familiar comfort of late-night television flowing seamlessly. But when Jimmy asked about Jack's week in New York, something shifted. "You know, Jimmy," Jack began, his voice losing its performative edge. "Something happened to me yesterday that I can't stop thinking about." He paused, running his hands through his hair, in a gesture that seemed more vulnerable than theatrical. "I was walking to the deli on 47th Street. You know, the one with the good sandwiches?" Jimmy nodded, leaning forward slightly. After years of hosting, he could sense when a story was about to become something more than entertainment. "There was this man sitting on the sidewalk," Jack continued, his voice quieter now. "Elderly guy, maybe 75, with this weathered face and clothes that had seen better days. He was holding a cardboard sign, but he wasn't asking for money." Jack's eyes began to glisten under the studio lights. The sign said, "Just want someone to talk to." The studio audience was completely still. Even the Roots had stopped their subtle musical accompaniment, recognizing the gravity of the moment unfolding. Most people were walking past him like he was invisible. Jack said, "You know how it is in the city. Everyone's got somewhere to be. Everyone's looking at their phones." He took a shaky breath, but as I got closer, he looked up at me and said something that stopped me cold. Jimmy set down his coffee mug, giving Jack his complete attention. "What did he say?" Jack's voice cracked slightly. He said, "You're that funny guy from the movies. Jack Black, right? You made me laugh when my wife was dying." The weight of those words settled over the studio like a physical presence. Jimmy's expression softened, and several audience members audibly gasped. "Jimmy," Jack continued, tears now visible on his cheeks. "This man whose society has forgotten, who's living on the streets with nothing but the clothes on his back. He remembered me, not just as some celebrity, but he remembered a specific moment when my work mattered to him during the darkest time of his life." Jack wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "His name is Robert Martinez. He told me he used to take his wife to the movies every Friday night for 37 years. When she got sick, when the chemo made her too weak to go out, they would watch movies at home. He said they watched School of Rock the week before she passed, and for 2 hours, they laughed together like they used to." Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, a gesture that broke every protocol of late-night television. He walked around and sat on the edge of his desk, closer to Jack, abandoning the formal distance between host and guest. "What did you do?" Jimmy asked softly. "I sat down next to him," Jack said, "right there on the sidewalk in my expensive jacket and my fancy shoes, and I asked him to tell me about her, about Margaret." Jack's voice grew stronger as he spoke her name. "Jimmy, for 3 hours I listened to this man tell me about the love of his life, how they met at a USO dance in 1963, how she made him laugh every single day for 43 years, how she used to sing while she cooked, even when she was sick." The cameras caught every emotion playing across both men's faces. This wasn't television anymore. It was a moment of pure human connection being witnessed by millions. "He's been on the streets for 2 years, Jack continued. "Since she died, he couldn't afford their apartment on his Social Security. He said he doesn't really want money or food. He just wants someone to remember that she existed, that their love was real." Jimmy's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, there's more," Jack interrupted gently. "When I finally had to go, when the deli was closing and people were starting to stare, Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out this old, faded photo." Jack reached into his own jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. He gave me this. Jimmy leaned forward to look at the picture. It showed a young couple dancing. The woman in a white dress. The man in a military uniform, both beaming with joy. Margaret and Robert, 1963. Jack whispered. He said he wanted me to have it, because I helped them have one last laugh together. Jimmy. He gave me his most precious possession because I had unknowingly been part of their final beautiful moment. The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. Jimmy reached out and gently touched Jack's shoulder. "Where is Robert now?" Jimmy asked. Jack smiled through his tears. "That's the thing, Jimmy. I couldn't just walk away. I asked him if he'd let me help. And you know what he said? He said, 'I don't need much. Just someone who remembers her name.' So I found him a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and safe. And every Sunday, I go over there, and he tells me more stories about Margaret." Jimmy stood up completely now, his own eyes wet. "Jack, you gave him his dignity back." "No," Jack shook his head. "He gave me something. He reminded me why we do this, why we perform, why we try to make people laugh. It's not for the fame or the money or the recognition. It's for moments like that, for a couple watching movies together while fighting cancer, for the love that continues even after loss." Jack looked directly into the main camera, speaking to the millions watching at home. "Robert taught me that everyone has a story worth hearing. Everyone has love worth remembering. And sometimes, being seen, being heard, being remembered, that's the most powerful gift we can give." Jimmy walked over and wrapped Jack in a hug, not the quick, showbiz hug of celebrity acquaintances, but the embrace of two human beings sharing a profound moment. The audience rose to their feet, applauding not for entertainment, but for the recognition of something sacred. When they separated, Jimmy spoke directly to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why Jack Black isn't just a performer. He's a reminder that fame means nothing if we don't use it to see the invisible, to hear the unheard, to remember the forgotten." Jack wiped his face and smiled. "Robert told me something else. He said Margaret would have loved knowing that their last laugh together helped someone else find their compassion. That even in her final days, she was still making the world a little brighter." As the show went to commercial, neither Jimmy nor Jack moved. They stood there, in the studio lights, surrounded by the quiet appreciation of everyone who had witnessed something extraordinary. Because sometimes, the most powerful performances happen not when we're trying to entertain, but when we're simply being human. The episode aired exactly as it happened, unedited, raw, and real. It became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments in history, not for its humor, but for its heart. Robert's story touched millions, and Margaret's memory was honored by strangers around the world, who suddenly understood that love never really dies. It just waits to be remembered. And Jack Black kept his promise. Every Sunday, in a small apartment in Queens, two men sit together and keep a love story alive, proving that sometimes the greatest performances happen off stage, in quiet moments where kindness is the only script that matters. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened after the cameras stopped rolling revealed even more about the power of human connection. As the studio audience filed out that night, many wiping tears from their eyes, something unprecedented occurred. People began approaching the stage, not for autographs or selfies, but to share their own stories of forgotten neighbors, invisible strangers, and acts of kindness that had changed their lives. Jimmy, still visibly moved, made a decision that would define not just that episode, but his entire approach to hosting. He announced that The Tonight Show would dedicate one segment each month to stories that matter. Real tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things for one another. Robert and Margaret's love story had sparked something bigger than entertainment. It had ignited a movement of compassion. In the weeks that followed, Jack's Instagram became flooded with photos from fans visiting elderly neighbors, volunteering at homeless shelters, and simply taking time to listen to strangers' stories. The hashtag Remember Their Names, began trending worldwide as people shared memories of loved ones lost and forgotten heroes in their communities. Robert himself became an unexpected symbol of resilience and dignity. When Jack asked if he'd be comfortable sharing more of Margaret's story publicly, Robert surprised everyone with his answer. She always wanted to help people feel less alone. If our story can do that, then she's still changing the world. 3 months later, Jimmy invited Robert to appear on The Tonight Show. The elderly man, now clean-shaven and wearing a suit Jack had helped him pick out, sat in the guest chair with quiet dignity. He brought with him a shoebox filled with 43 years of love letters, photographs and mementos of his life with Margaret. She used to say that love isn't something you have, it's something you do, Robert told Jimmy, his weathered hands carefully holding their wedding photo. Every day for 43 years, we chose to love each other, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. The interview became one of the most powerful segments in late-night television history. Robert's wisdom, earned through decades of joy and loss, resonated with viewers across generations. His simple truth, that love is a choice we make daily, sparked conversations in living rooms across America about what really matters in life. Jimmy found himself changed by the experience. In interviews months later, he would say, "Robert taught me that everyone who sits in that guest chair has a story worth hearing. Not just the celebrities promoting movies, but the human beings with real experiences, real love, real loss." That night with Jack and Robert reminded me why I wanted to be in television in the first place. To connect people. Jack's friendship with Robert deepened over time. Their Sunday visits became sacred rituals, where Robert would share memories of Margaret, while Jack listened with the attention, usually reserved for great performances. Sometimes they would cook Margaret's favorite recipes together. Other times they would simply sit in comfortable silence. Two men from different generations, bound by their understanding that love transcends loss. On what would have been Robert and Margaret's 60th wedding anniversary, Jack organized a surprise celebration at the Tonight Show studio. The audience was filled with couples who had been inspired by their story, some married for decades, others just beginning their journeys together. Robert, surrounded by this community of love, finally felt ready to let go of some of his grief while holding tight to his memories. Margaret would have loved this, he told the audience, his voice strong and clear. She always believed that love multiplies when you share it. Tonight, I can feel her here with all of us. The impact extended far beyond entertainment. Homeless advocacy organizations reported increased volunteerism and donations following the episode. Margaret and Robert's story had put faces and names to issues that many people had previously ignored or overlooked. Jack established the Margaret Martinez Foundation in her honor, dedicated to providing support and dignity to elderly homeless individuals. Robert became the foundation's most passionate advocate, speaking at events and reminding audiences that homelessness doesn't erase a person's worth or their capacity to love and be loved. Years later, when asked about that Tuesday night that changed everything, Jack would smile and say, "I thought I was just going to buy a sandwich. Instead, I met a teacher who reminded me that our job as performers isn't just to make people laugh, it's to make people feel less alone in this world." Jimmy still keeps Margaret's photograph on his desk, a daily reminder that the most powerful stories often come from the most unexpected places. The image shows a young couple frozen in time, their joy eternal, their love a testament to what matters. The ripple effects of that Tuesday night continued to spread. Viewers began sending letters to The Tonight Show, sharing their own encounters with overlooked individuals whose stories deserved to be heard. A teacher in Ohio wrote about her elderly neighbor who had been a jazz pianist in the 1940s, but now lived alone. Each story reinforced the lesson Robert had taught them all, that every person carries within them a universe of experiences, love, and wisdom that deserves recognition. The homeless man on the street corner might be a veteran who served his country. The elderly woman sitting alone might be a retired teacher who shaped hundreds of young minds. Jack often reflected on how a simple walk to buy a sandwich had transformed his understanding of fame and purpose. I used to think success meant making people laugh, he shared in a later interview. Now I understand that real success is when you can make someone feel valued for who they are. Robert's apartment became a gathering place for others who had experienced homelessness or loss. Word spread quietly through the community about the Sunday gatherings where stories were shared, dignity was restored, and no one was judged. Margaret's spirit lived on in these moments of connection. The foundation Jack established grew beyond anything he had imagined. Inspired by Margaret and Robert's story, volunteers began visiting elderly individuals in shelters, nursing homes, and on the streets, armed with nothing more than time and the willingness to listen. On quiet nights, when the studio was empty and the lights were dimmed, Jimmy would think about that moment when Jack's voice cracked and the laughter stopped. It reminded him that beneath all the glitter and glamour lay something far more precious, the opportunity to witness human experience. And every Sunday, without fail, the sounds of laughter and remembrance continue to fill a small apartment in Queens, where love lives on in the sacred act of being heard, being seen, and being remembered. Because Robert was right, love isn't something you have, it's something you do.